human rights and people's rights. African Union, war court. Sa court yi etena nsem a human rights nsem so na mo hwe edi etu yie. Na sa court yi fi se o sha se odi dwuma no mfie poro eduanu eni 20 years ni. O celebrate 120th anniversary. And I feel so obie 2026 court section ano. Omo to nsa frɛ omo special guest of honor na enye obia say ye mampanyin His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. Me pese me to asoma kire mu na emom me se subscribe to WIDERmedia. Ne etene say ye mampanyin John Dramani Mahama ekopie mu ewo Tanzania. Na ho na African Union Court no etena se a oye 20th anniversary. Na fe wasan ebie 2026 court ano. Nti special guest of honor. Na no di sem etu dwa na se na ye nyina anim ne mampanyin na no hwam. Na fe wonam kwa bi so epushi Accra reset agenda. Kame ho na ye nkonkonhwe African Court for Human and People's Rights program.
Inviting me to address the court today as your guest of honor at the opening of the judicial year and the launch of the court's 20th anniversary. I'm grateful because this institution and its commemoration hold deep personal significance for me. My connection to these themes is rooted in my family's history, which has shaped my own perspectives on justice and human rights. I've spent much of my life reflecting on justice, due process, and the rule of law. Why are these rights afforded to some and not to others? The same applies to human rights and dignity, which have been on my mind in recent days since I received your invitation. February 24th last week marked another anniversary. It was the 60th year since the 1966 coup d'etat in Ghana that overthrew the government of Ghana's first president, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. My father was a minister of state in Nkrumah's government. He was interrogated, taken into custody, and he remained in detention for over a year. By 1974, just 8 years later, Ghana, through another coup, was being led by Colonel Ike Achampong. And my father, he appreciated Colonel Achampong, whose policies promoted Ghana's self-reliance. He believed that Achampong had Ghana's best interest at heart. My father decided to write a letter to the head of state, Colonel Achampong, to let him know that he was doing a wonderful job of leading Ghana. In that letter, he offered, as usual, his unsolicited advice. And he said, and I quote, "But do not hold on to power for too long. Leave when the applause is the loudest," my father wrote. He sent the letter, and soon after, military personnel arrived at our home and took my father into custody for questioning. He was detained for several days on suspicion of subversion. But later, Colonel Achampong ultimately determined that he posed no real threat and ordered his release. Although I stand before you as a head of state, I remain the child whose father was detained for serving his country and advising its leader. Your Excellencies, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, I share my father's story to illustrate that while he was one individual, his experience demonstrates that no one stands alone. The effects of social injustice and human rights violations extend beyond individuals. They impact entire families and communities. Although our continent comprises 55 sovereign nations, our destinies are closely linked together. Globally, many still view Africa as one single entity and refer to us collectively as Africa. Is it any wonder that they do that? Look at the synergy that existed between us during Africa's era of liberation. One nation after another in quick succession declared freedom from colonial rule. Then again, when coup d'etats became fashionable, that tendency spread like a contagion through nearly every nation. We are each other's keepers. And this is why we need an institution that serves all but is beholden to none. the African Court of Human and People's Rights. Let us now consider the institution that safeguards our values and rights. Over the past 2 decades of its operation, the African Court of Human and People's Rights has proven time and again that it has the fortitude and courage to recalibrate our moral compass. We need that kind of oversight so that we remain observant and respectful of the rights and duties enumerated in the articles of the Banjul Charter, to which all the continent's nations are signatories. And I'm proud that Ghana has contributed its share of legal minds to this august court over the years. For far too long, we've compared ourselves to the West and used what we believe were their standards as our benchmarks for all our endeavors. The reality we see today should serve as a clear call to action. What should be our paradigm in understanding and interacting with the rest of the world, even as we preserve our dignity and cultural identity as Africans? Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, I call upon African Union member states who have not yet ratified the protocol to please do so without delay. To my colleagues, heads of states in these countries, I assure you that you have nothing to fear from this court. I humbly ask all African nations and individuals to respect and implement the court's judgments in good faith, and to also make the declaration to allow individuals and non-governmental organizations direct access to this court. My father's political tribulations did not end with his detention after he wrote his unsolicited letter advising the head of state. He had to live in exile again for 13 years after another coup d'etat. But many others suffered even greater injustice and abuse of their rights and dignity. Many individuals have endured significant hardship throughout their lives. The Lumumbas, the Modlanis, the Sankaras, the Cabrals, the Prempes, the Yasantues, the Kabalegas, the Nyomas, Mandelas, and Bikos are all recognized as martyrs of the African Revolution. Had the African Court of Human and People's Rights existed earlier in our past, these grave instances of human rights abuses and injustice would have been a very important case for you to adjudicate. We would have secured justice against racist apartheid criminals, colonialists, and even our own oppressive African dictators who tortured and sent many of their countrymen to death, and countrymen and women to death. As I said earlier, all the nations on the African continent are each other's keeper, and I truly believe this. I also believe that each of us is a keeper of the dreams and hopes of our ancestors, hopes and dreams that they could not achieve. We've paved the way for their dreams to be realized, if not by us, then by generations succeeding us. Justice systems in Africa have strengthened over the past decade. In Ghana, we're strengthening our own judicial systems. As I stand and recollect my youth and my fear for my father through my recurring nightmares, I realize that I can put those fears to rest. For the past 20 years, we've had a court that can protect the rights and dignity of African people beyond the borders of our individual nations. So allow me to say, while I'm here in this historic city of Arusha, a city well known as a site where human rights are affirmed and the dignity of African people is protected, that the time for Africa is now. Now is the time for us to meet the challenge of keeping the promise we have made to future generations, promises we have signed and pledged to uphold. Now is the time to deepen our commitments to the courts so that in 20 years from now, when we celebrate its 40th anniversary, it will stand as the leading international judicial body and a model for others. My lords, ladies and gentlemen, now is the time for Africa to step into its greatness. Excellencies, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of all the good citizens of Africa, I wish you a happy 20th anniversary celebration, and I thank you for your kind attention.
I now respectfully invite Honorable Justice Prez, President of the African Court of Human and People's Rights, to present this gift to His Excellency, our guest of honor. There is a commemorative plaque that the President of the Court will present to guest of honor. The plaque symbolizes your distinguished participation in this ceremony. There is a second gift. There is a wooden carving that the President will present to you. We are in the land of the Big Five here, as you have. So this carving depicts the Big Five.
Omampenyi kasa no kase Ghana ya strengthen your court system no. Ase misane say we give Ghana for wa resemu your court system yimu ana. Ja wadwen kire wa comment section ho ma remfi. Hi WIDERmedia, subscribe, like and share your videos. Yeah, that's it.